Here now with Steve Ceruti for Waving the Flag. He is a producer over at The Ringer and the country's biggest Orlando Magic fan, or at least the biggest representative of this team in the national media. We're excited to be joined by Ceruti and talk Magic for what we do every week, but it doesn't get a lot of love elsewhere. So we're hoping we give you a little bit of a platform to do more than a minute, hopefully,
nice.
Ceruti. But we'll start with basketball speed dating, which is a very intimate name for something that is very fun and simple, which is that I will give you some prompts and you will give me your one-word, one-sentence answer. We will do it all Magic edition this time around, since that is the spirit of today's conversation. The first question, your first favorite player from the Orlando Magic.
This is why I'm a Magic fan, because I didn't grow up in Orlando. So Penny Hardaway was the guy that was. It was Penny and Shaq really, but I love those little Penny commercials. I love the shoes, and I was like 6 or 7, I think, at the time when they were like in the finals and making that run, and T-Mac kind of like solidified it in the early 2000s. But originally it was Penny. It was the jerseys. It was his game pre-injury. I love that dude, man.
As a Suns fan, Penny holds a place in my heart as well, although you got the best years out in Orlando. Next question, first jersey of an Orlando Magic player. Was it also Penny?
It was Shaq. It was actually Shaq, because I think it was a gift. I think it was gifted to me. Somebody knew I was a Magic fan. I was like, hey, these are obviously the one that everybody buys. But it was definitely the 34. I had the blue pinstripe Shaq jersey.
It's iconic. Chris, are the Magic jerseys the best in the NBA? I don't think we've ever had an argument about jersey styles, but it's up there for me.
Up there for me, and I think the pinstripe should just be part of the look forever. Like, even if they're going to say, hey, we can't, that's like not modern enough, or Nike is who's bad at their jobs a lot of the time right now. Just saying, as I'm wearing a Nike
I was going to say, as you're donning their gear, it's all good. I'm a Nike guy too, it's fine.
Look, the basics, incredible. A lot of the jerseys across all sports, pretty bad. But if you're going to say, hey, we can't have this as the main jersey, but it can be like your alternate every year, just make that like the city edition or whatever they're calling it every year, and that would be cool.
So I've heard that about rumors of a rebrand for a while, because they, even as close as a couple years ago, were still wearing the Dwight Howard era jerseys, which I hated. I don't like that weird V-neck. I thought they worked for Dwight because they were able to like expose his incredibly large shoulders and back muscles, because it was almost like a thin tank top more than it was like a normal jersey. But I don't like them anymore. They've slowly sort of changed them a little bit, but I've heard a major sort of rebrand is coming. And I think they were just waiting for the team to actually be good again, or like something to be excited about, other than like being the 8 seed and losing to the Bucks and the Raptors in back-to-back years. So I think that is coming, but man, if they just straight up went back to those OG pinstripe, the white, the black, and the blue, I don't think there's a better jersey it's certainly in basketball, maybe in sports. Like, I put that up there with the Raiders NFL jerseys. Like, any jersey in sports, give that like that, especially the blue and the black ones, man. They're just so clean. They're so clean. And like the new updated Nike edition of that jersey, I think would be great.
There are so many teams, honestly, where if Nike asked me to sit down for whatever reason in an alternate universe and just give them my 2 cents, I would probably start and end with just go back to the 90s or early 2000s edition of the jerseys you already wore, bring those back, and
they do wear
you'll be good to go.
They do wear one of their alternates. I forget what it's called, because there's like 9 different names now for all these jerseys. But one of them is, and I had this jersey too. It was the T-Mac jersey. Remember the one with it where it had just all stars in it? They do have that one. That's back this year. That jersey is, as the Europeans say, that's class.
It is. All right. Speaking of the Dwight Howard era, the Magic team you're most sure got screwed out of a title.
Screwed out of a title. Well, I don't know that the 90s team got screwed out of a title. So I guess I'd have to say, man, I don't know that I don't like the phrasing there, because I don't know that I agree that any of them got screwed. I think people, Kevin Clark and I have talked about this a lot. I think the 09 team, I don't think people realize how competitive that series was, even though, if you just look at it on paper, it wasn't competitive. They're a Courtney Lee layup away from, winning game 2. All those games are competitive. I think the only real blowout one was like the clinching one for the Lakers. Like, all those games were really competitive, and they were working Jameer Nelson sort of back into the lineup, if you remember. And Rafer Alston was the point guard, and Rafer was playing extremely well. And I was on the time, like on team, like do not bring Jameer back. Like it's going to screw up the chemistry, and it kind of did. So I guess I'd have to say the 09 team. I don't think they got screwed, but I do think that team doesn't get enough credit for how good they were, two, how revolutionary they were because they shot just a shit ton of threes. Hope I can swear on the pod.
You can fucking swear on the pod. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. A shit ton of threes before anybody else was doing it. And that series, they could have very easily beaten the Lakers in that series in a different universe.
I mean, what they did to the Cavs in the round before, real quick, is just like that era, LeBron, like carrying a team. That Cavs team not that good.
That's what I was saying. They were a bad matchup. For the Magic were an awesome matchup against the Cavs because they just had so much size.
Yeah. But just smoked them, and it's like, oh, that should tell you something. If like wins mean things in the playoffs, and if you smoke a LeBron team like that does say something in retrospect, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree.
Last one. Player you can't quit. Somebody doesn't have to currently be on the Magic, pass through Orlando at one point in time, that you still hold out hope can become better than they are, even if they're already a good NBA player. Somebody you just think, okay, if they're in the right situation, they'll figure it out.
Well, my one before this year was Jalen Suggs, so I've nailed that one. If I have to go before Jalen Suggs, it was Mario Hezonja. I just always liked that guy. I wanted Porzingis so badly in that draft, and obviously I think he went the pick right before the Magic, and the Magic took the other Euro. But everything that people were talking about him, Hezonja, I mean, before that draft was that like this dude, like he had an attitude, he was confident, he was a good shooter, playmaker, like everything you want in kind of like that modern Euro type guy. Not quite Luka, but like a Luka light type player who's like a playmaker, can make others better, but also get his own. And it just, I don't know, it just never worked out for him. I mean, that team was terrible that he went into. He played for the Knicks for a little bit. He bounced around. I think he's playing back in the Euro League, which is probably better for him. But I just will never. It's in another alternate universe, as I use that pun again or that phrase again. I feel like he's a good NBA player. I just think there's a good NBA player in there. It just didn't work out for him whenever he got drafted.
He's not that different from Franz, like the best version of him, right? I mean, they don't play exactly the same way. I think Franz is more polished and a higher floor player, clearly, because Hezonja flamed out of the NBA, but stylistically, size-wise, it's not super different. So I guess it panned out in the long run. But speaking of Jalen Suggs, Chris, I will let you. I don't know if it's going to be a happy or sad question here, coming off of what Mr. Suggs did to your Cleveland Cavaliers last night. But take us away. Let's talk Suggs.
So I love Jalen Suggs. I am not there where some of the NBA and Magic subreddit is, where they're like, is this guy a Defensive Player of the Year candidate? But every single week, you watch that guy play defense, Ceruti, and he plays like he's a strong safety who's coming to just maul someone across the middle. It's like him and Caruso are the two guards that I'm just like, yeah, they could pick someone up 94 feet, and I'm not concerned. So even with where he's at offensively, I am just at a point where amid that guard rotation with Fultz, with Black, who's really young, obviously, and him, and Cole Anthony, that's the guy I think I like the most, just because he is such a demon on defense, and he's shooting well enough from three this year where even if you have to go find a better lead creator, or Franz steps into that role, or Paolo steps into the role, or something long-term as the lead, kind of keep the flow going, I just love how he plays basketball. I'm obsessed with the way that guy is playing and how good he is at it.
Yeah, and that's why I could not quit him, to go back to your earlier question. Like, I knew the first 2 years in the league, like he just, he couldn't shoot. He was weirdly like not finishing at the rim too, for being an athletic guy who gets to the rim pretty easily. Like I just kind of thought that stuff would turn around. Not necessarily the shooting that we've seen this year. He's been a very good shooter this year. And that's what they need. I mean, they just, if he could knock down consistent 3-point shots, he's going to be like a borderline all-star. Like that's a low end. I'm not saying I don't think he's at Franz or Paolo's level, but he's different in that sense. But he's certainly a first-team All-NBA guard, and I don't think there's a better defensive guard in the league right now than there is in him, because he plays there's a play. It happened probably a month or so ago when they were playing the Raptors, and it's like everything you need to know about Jalen Suggs. It's like 2 minutes into the game, and he just like he makes this incredible like diving poke steal. It goes right to Paolo, fast break, kicks it out to Franz, hits a three. They go up like double digits early, and it's at home in Orlando, and he's just like pumping up the crowd. It's 2 minutes into the game. 2 minutes into the game, he's losing his freaking mind. And like, it's that kind of like intensity. Like, he's a winning basketball player. Whenever anybody would ask me about him beforehand, I'd be like, oh man, he's like a huge bust. Like, you must be disappointed in him. I'm like, I don't know. I watch the games and the guy is a menace and he gives a shit. And I just think there's a winning player in there. And I've seen so many guys go through Orlando where I'm like, oh man, like I think there's something there, but it's not going to happen here. We saw that with Aaron Gordon. I think we saw that with Victor Oladipo. And I'm like, please don't let this be another guy, because I just think there is something in there. He's going to be successful somewhere else. And I'm glad it's all clicked in this year. But I think it's more about confidence this year. I think I think the defense is always going to be there. The intensity is always going to be there. But now they're winning, and he's able to contribute offensively. He's finishing at the rim. He's shooting in the mid 30% from three. I think all of that stuff has just like kickstarted, like in his brain now, like he's an all-star. He in his mind is probably like, I'm the guy on this team. And there's certainly more of a big three than there ever was before. And he's the perfect fit next to those guys. Because if you're going to have Franz and Paolo as these two 6'10" like playmaking guys, forwards with the ball in their hand, you need guards that are just going to be menaces defensively and he can knock down shots. And if Jalen's going to do that, he's going to be the perfect fit next to those two guys.
It's been interesting, I think, with Fultz out too, because one of the things I feel like I've realized about Suggs is the ball has to be in his hands more than it was for him to be at his best, I think, because he is still a guy who had the ball in high school and college and everything else, and you can't ignore that part of his game, especially if the jumper, even if it's better this year, maybe it gets closer to just average, it's never going to be a strength. So you can't just say go stand in the corner to a guy like that. And so I think that it's another unique dude next to a tandem of very unique dudes in Franz and Paolo that makes this team fun to just like think about. And as they add more stuff and kind of reveal more about themselves, I feel like we know more about the players, and I get more confused about what shape the team's ultimately going to take, which is what makes it fun. But let's jump into the other guys a little bit too, because we watched that Cavs game last night, and the amount that Paolo was involved, I loved. I mean, there's a lot of games where that's not always the case, and there's reasons for that. Turns the ball over, doesn't always have full control. He's a second-year player. Last night he did. Hits a big fall-away jumper where he just, shoulders into, I think it was Dean Wade, and then just turns around, pirouettes into a game winner, basically, that iced it. But what do you think of those guys, Paolo and Franz, Ceruti, specifically playing together this year, playing in a more structured environment, and how do they get better from here as we watch the rest of the season? Because I think that's kind of the main question about this Magic team that is a lot better than last year, but still struggling on offense, all things considered.
Yeah, I think, it's I talked about it a little bit before. If you have those two guys, like your guards can't be normal guards. Like I don't think you could bring a ball dominant guy in like a Donovan Mitchell when that trade was being discussed, or whoever's on the table. Because anytime, well, it's two things. Like one, if you think that those guys are on the trajectory of being future All-Stars, which I think that they are, they might even be this year, who knows? Why are you trying to take the ball out of their hands? Like let them. I'm okay with them figuring it out and letting them make mistakes. And I think last year, they got up to a 5-20 start, and it was mostly because like Fultz wasn't there, and they had to basically thrust those guys, and Paolo is obviously as a rookie, into like main ball handling roles, and they just kind of weren't really ready for that. And then Franz goes this summer. They end last season well. Franz goes to the World Cup. Obviously, Paolo goes too, but Franz goes there and wins it, and is the best player on the German team that wins the title. And like he's just more confident in like running a show and running a team. So I think those two guys, like the way this team's going to have to be built, and it's why I've kind of pushed back on all these different trade scenarios, because they do have a lot of assets. They certainly had 2 first-round picks last year. And everyone wants them to make a trade for a bigger star or somebody else. And I'm just kind of content with, and maybe it's because we're in Orlando and there's not a lot of pressure. If we were in New York or Miami or LA, like they'd be like, all right, let's get more stars. I'm just content with like, let's see what these guys grow into. And the thing about the Magic team too, that's really interesting is I don't know that there's like a better vibes team than them around the league. The entire roster of guys love each other, each other. Like when Anthony Black gets into the lineup and he's making shots, like the team's losing their minds. Like they're just happy for everybody, 1 through 12 on the entire roster. And there just aren't that many teams that one are that deep and two feel that way. So I think you just got to let this team ride. Like I wouldn't make any drastic moves over the next couple of years. Like I would let Franz and Pop, they're going to make their mistakes. They're not going to be probably the 2 seed at the end of the season in the Eastern Conference, but like let them make their mistakes this year and grow and figure it out. My goal going into the year was we should be a play-in team. Like, we should be competing for the play-in spot, be one of the best 10 teams in the conference. It doesn't feel that difficult. And now I think I would probably say they should be just a straight playoff team. I would if they somehow got into the play-in, I'd be disappointed. But I'm not really ready to just say, hey, let's put our foot on the accelerator and try to put this thing in a warp drive. Like, let them just grow organically, because they're still, again, it's a second and a third year player leading this team. Yes, they have a lot of nice vets. Like, I think Wendell Carter Jr., who's been out for a while, by the way, is one of the best value contracts in the entire league. He's an incredible asset for them at center. Anthony Black has been okay this year. I mean, I didn't even think he was going to play that much, to be honest with you, and then injuries happened. It's why I didn't give up on Jonathan Isaac, who I still think is an asset. Like, I want to just see these guys continue to grow as a group and not fuck with it. And then if there's a problem, if something happens and something doesn't work, okay, then you can pivot. But for now, the vibes are good, man. Just let it roll.
So what I'm gathering out of that is you would say no to Zach LaVine if the Bulls were like,
God. Hey. No way. I think I've said this. No disrespect to him or whatever, I think he's my least favorite player in the league. I don't like watching him. I think it's empty calories, stats. I think he's just always going to be sort of a guy who doesn't play winning basketball. It's why, like, when people talk about him going to the Warriors, that I'm like, man, that's the last thing they need, is like some guy just chucking shots in Steph's face and not listening to Steve Kerr. And I mean, the only place I think it probably could work for him is like Miami, because they just make everything work. But I would not touch him with a 10-foot pole if I was the Magic.
Okay, so hearing you talk through that, I still think that there's a window there to upgrade on basically what Ingles and Harris are giving them, especially because those guys aren't going to be around forever. So if you could get something that is a player who can kind of shoot, is comfortable enough with the ball that it's not just a spot-up guy, and, fits the identity in terms of probably a little bigger, probably somebody who can take better matchups, bigger matchups, not have to have the, Franz and Paolo do that every night, especially Franz. I think that's where I still see a window to upgrade. But maybe that's just Black and, whatever comes in the draft in the future. I guess I just, I see the window with those two players' salary, and I see how valuable they've been for this team, where the bench wins them games. And I'm like, well, hold on. Maybe you can turn that guy into like a 26-year-old or 24-year-old version of those two and get somewhere. I don't think it's LaVine either. Chris and I haven't really been able to convince ourselves of that one. I'm not even sure who the player I'm describing is, but that's been the thing I can't get off of, is like, what if you could just get a shooter who's comfortable with the ball? Maybe it's a bench guy. I think that could take them a long way, especially looking forward. Do you have any guys in mind, or are you straight up let it ride?
I would let it ride this year, but that doesn't. Yeah, that's right. That doesn't mean I would not make a trade in the future. But I think for this year, I'm comfortable with what. I mean, listen, you never know what opportunities are presented with you. Like, maybe somebody becomes available, and it's like, hey, this is a no-brainer. Makes our team better. Like, changes our timeline a little bit. Makes us a little bit younger. That's fine. I do like Ingles though, because I think you need, this team is so young that you need that. You need a version of that guy. Like, it just can't be all guys 24 years and under. Like, that's just not. That's so rare that teams like that win in the league. And I do think when everybody was making jokes about Ingles in the offseason about how, the Magic had all this cap room and they got Joe Ingles, what the hell are they doing? And I was kind of a little, not that I was upset about it, but I was like, I maybe expected more. But he's been incredibly valuable as a second unit ball handling just guy that just kind of knows what he's doing, especially late in games. I mean, the one thing with the Magic that they've struggled with is kind of holding on leads late in games, and he helps that. That's the problem, is there's not an obvious guy. There just isn't an obvious. And when it was Donovan Mitchell, it's Zach LaVine now. There's been these names, and those aren't the kind of players that I'm looking to bring in. One guy that did intrigue me a little bit this offseason was Buddy Hield, because he was clearly available basically for free, it seemed like, from Indiana, because they didn't want him. He's playing a little bit better, so I don't know what it would take to give him up. But if this offseason, if I had to give up Jalen Suggs to get Buddy Hield, I'm not doing that. Cole Anthony was a guy that I didn't love, and now I've kind of grown to love, because he's really accepted the sixth man role and not thinking he's the best player on the team. So I just don't know. Again, things change. You don't know who's available. Superstars, somebody's going to get mad and want out, and the Magic should obviously kick the tires on that whenever it happens. But I just don't think there's an obvious, hey, yeah, go and get that guy right now, and it totally changes your fortunes.
The name that I would have liked before he went and got a massive amount of money from the Houston Rockets would have been Fred VanVleet, because you're talking about a guard who can come in and be the quote-unquote adult of a backcourt, but then also isn't taking too much away from Franz and Paolo. Like, to your point, you have to find someone who's like a little bit of a funky fit because it's Paolo and Franz, and there is a generation of guards that I think are coming up and more comfortable playing on and off a little bit. It seems like there's that kind of guard coming up, but they're not like ready yet, so it's like a hard thing to totally find that perfect fit. I mean, the other name that I think it would probably drive people nuts a little bit, and like it's gone badly for him in Memphis, but like you could have talked me into Marcus Smart as like, hey,
you can't have him
like,
in Suggs though, because they're the same. They're
No,
like
that's true.
they're the same player, you know.
Okay, what if
VanVleet is
you
similar
bring
too.
like 90s jerseys, 90s basketball? Hear me out.
and just beat the crap out of everybody?
Yeah, 100%. You're a football team then at that point.
Yeah, the VanVleet, I wouldn't have been opposed to the VanVleet thing, not at what the Rockets paid him. Not that it matters for them, because they're better, so good for them. Like, you know, clearly he was valuable, and I think they needed like an adult in the room on that team. But I with the Magic, like, I don't know, like another undersized guard, like I don't know that they necessarily needed. Like, would I take him on the team? Sure, but not for what it would have taken to get him. So I acknowledge that I'm being probably entirely too picky. I've been accused of this the number of times that I've been asked this question by Magic fans, but I just, unless it's like a clear upgrade, I just don't. You have all these assets you've built, you have all these this draft capital that you drafted and that are now trying to develop. Like, just see what happens. Like, there's no, you're not better than Boston. Well, who knows? I mean, I think they've won 5 straight against the Celtics, and they play them on Friday night, so we'll see. But like, you're likely not beating Boston in a playoff series. You're likely not beating Milwaukee in a playoff series. I don't know if you're beating Philadelphia in a playoff series. So like, you have this window where you're good, but you don't really have the expectations yet. Just like, take advantage of that. Like, let these guys grow without us being like, all right, what do we need to do to like take the next level? Because that's going to come sooner than later.
So let's just close here then, because I think focusing on what's already there, they're good enough, right? I mean, I think we're a quarter of the way into the season, and if you use the end of last season, like, this team's been competitive, if not outright good, for almost all of 2023 at this point. So the young guys are a year older. I think Paolo in particular just feels a lot more comfortable. His turnovers are still high. I think that's the number one thing I'm watching for their offense is how can he continue to develop as just a guy reading defenses, whether that's as a scorer or a playmaker. But what do you want to see from the star tandem or just the rest of this roster, especially looking forward to 2 defense-first guys coming back soon, and Carter, well, Fultz, we don't know if it'll be soon, but coming back eventually, to get the offense where it probably needs to be to have a chance against the teams you're talking about or whoever they face in that first round. What do you want to see from the offense?
Well, they have a tough schedule coming up. They play Boston back-to-back, Miami, Milwaukee, Indiana. They play Philly in there, Phoenix, Golden State. I mean, they have like a pretty rough schedule the next, month or so. So I don't think they're going to just like finish the season as the 2 seed. I think if they're a solid playoff team, like if they're in a top 6 seed, avoid the play-in, that to me is still an incredibly successful jump from what they have been the last couple of years and certainly last year. And it was certainly a jump from what I expected this season. And I think from specifically on Paolo, I mean, Paolo, my biggest concern when they drafted him, and like, I famously or infamously, I mean, I still feel good about this, but I was like a Chet over Paolo guy. And not that and I will say, I think both guys went to the right spot. I think both guys are going to be really good. I don't know which one's going to be better, but I think, the Magic probably needed a guy who was more ball dominant, was more of an alpha, like number 1 option, like Paolo is, versus like Chet, who kind of plays second fiddle to SGA, as they already had a star out in OKC. But I think the jury's still out on that. But my biggest concern with Paolo before the draft was like, is he just going to be like a big who thinks he's a wing, and is he going to be like Julius Randle, who just is incredibly inefficient and is frustrating to watch, and yes, is talented and big and can look incredible and play bully ball at certain times, and for his size is like a good shooter, ball handler? Or, is he going to be like a bigger Jason Tatum, where it's a little bit more, he's more put together, he like kind of knows what he's doing a little bit more offensively. And I think I'm not saying he is Jason Tatum, but he's closer to that. And so I'm not that worried about the turnovers with Paolo. Like, I think, anytime you're a second year player and you're having that much of the offense put on you and you're winning games, I think, I'm willing to sort of forgive that and let sort of you grow. Franz is like a little bit more of a natural, I think, like ball handler, leader. But the thing with Franz is that he's way more passive, I should say, than Paolo. Like there'll be times when Franz is like cooking, and it's like, dude, you're the guy. Like, keep going, heat check. Like, take a heat check every once in a while. Like, he's almost too conservative with the way he plays, which is why I don't think like you see him put up like 30, 40 points as much as some of these other guys, even though I think he's capable of it. So I do like the yin and yang of those two guys. Like, they're almost like, if you put them together, they fit really well, even though they're similar type sizes, and obviously they're both like big wings / fours. So my thing would just be continue to develop, continue to be competitive. They're hanging their hat on defense. And if they can if they can somehow get a home court playoff series, like that would be the dream. I don't know that that's super realistic. Maybe it is, but I think they can go into Cleveland. I think they can go into the Knicks. I think they can certainly beat some of those teams, even if they're on the road. So that would be the goal of the rest of the season. And then to your points about the trade stuff, like see what's available. Like if people are out there, I kind of feel like the guard rotation, with Suggs, Black, Fultz when he comes back, and Cole Anthony, I kind of feel like Fultz might be the odd man out because we've seen how good they can be without him. Like I've seen people throw Wendell Carter Jr. in the trade thing. Like I would keep him just because his contract is so valuable. But maybe you could dangle Fultz and see what you can get. But I'm not in a huge hurry to make any major changes. I just ride it out, see what the season looked like, and then in the offseason, you can make bigger changes to try to take a whole nother leap the following season.
Yeah, Fultz is the one though that he hasn't come up, and I think that's right. He's kind of the guard of the like four guards that I'm kind of least intrigued by, and he's got $17 million you could trade, and like I like Fultz I'm sure a lot, they are,
by the way, too. Like I think he's way better than people think he is. He's not quite the perfect lead guard for this team because they do need more of a shooter, but he's been a better shooter than people want to admit. It's never going to be great. He's never going to be an all-star, but he's a very, very solid point guard in the NBA.